Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Utah Stories Show. Very exciting program today, very exciting day. Our brand new April issue of Utah Stories magazine is now available all along the Wasatch Front. You can see it's hot off the press, and it's our health and nature issue. So we decided to focus on the Great Salt Lake and just the awful ideas that are coming down the pipe concerning the lake. They want to build a landfill right on the shore of the Great Salt Lake in Promontory Point. And we have a former reporter from the Salt Lake Tribune helped us with that story, Kathy McKendrick. And she did an excellent job investigating how and why that is now stalled, thankfully. And then we did a visit to Utah's biggest medical cannabis farm, and we're surprised by how much demand there has been since they started the medical cannabis program in Utah. Investigation by Eric Peterson of Utah Investigative Journalism Project into young living oils and the actual scientific data backing up their claims. If you like essential oils, that's fine, but you gotta read this story about the actual scientific data backing up their claims. It's all in our April issue of Utah Stories, available at all associated food stores along the Wasatch Front, as well as 700 locations. If you can't get your hands on it, go to our website, subscribe to the magazine. It's $24 for the entire year, and it's all the best local journalism you're going to find anywhere. Okay, so tons to get to in this program. A lot of just sort of scandalous breaking local news. I want to get right into that. But before I do, go on over to our website, utahstories.com, and subscribe to our digital newsletter. Get the voice of local Utah delivered right to your inbox. Just put your email address right in here, and we will send you one email a week. If you don't open the email 4 or 5 times in a row, we unsubscribe you automatically. We have one of the highest open rates of any digital e-newsletter. It's like 35% of people who get the newsletter open it because everybody loves it. This story, Conspiracy Store opens in Salt Lake, where you can get all your tin hats, your Flat Earth merchandise, your QAnon merchandise. You would get a free copy of the Anarchist Cookbook just for coming in. That was an April Fool's joke. Happy April Fool's Day, everybody. Sorry for those of you who actually believed it was. We're getting really excited about it existing. It's not real. Okay. So our main story today. Salt Lake City County Republican Party Chair Scott Miller has stepped down to increasing pressure from the media about the mishandling of sexual harassment allegations. Our question is this cancel culture run amok, or did this guy really need to step down? And then we do a deep dive into the guy who was committing these alleged sexual misconduct for 3 years. His name, his picture here, if you're joining us on YouTube, is Dave Robinson. He was the Republican candidate for Salt Lake County mayor. We go into that. We go into his history, his background, who he was, and what his motives were. We think this is a very important point that we want to make in this episode, because if you have a culture of corruption, a toxic environment, as these ladies are putting it, to get to the bottom of it, you have to ask how and why. And that's what this podcast is all about. We're asking how and why does a man such as this, who has a track record for being abusive toward ladies, stay in power, stay in office as the unofficial communications director for so long? That's the major question we are asking. And I wanted to tell you, if you appreciate deeper, more significant news coverage of the important issues that affect the quality of life in Utah, please hit that like button. That helps us get out to way more people than we otherwise would. You smashing that like button tells the algorithm this is significant content and more people should see it. So if you'll do that on YouTube, that'd be great. Or give us a 5-star review on iTunes if you like this as well. That would be awesome. All right, so the Salt Lake Tribune broke this story wide open. And Salt Lake Tribune, all kudos to them. They have a bunch of awesome lady reporters who invited Robinson and Miller to defend themselves, and they told them that they were going to write this story, and they basically had to succumb to pressure. Scott Miller succumbed to the pressure and had to step down. And but my question is, this guy was the unofficial communications director for 3 years. Why is there an unofficial communication director, and is he receiving a salary for that role? How did we get here? How did they get here? So let's look back and see what actually happened here. It's a series of stories that start back to, we have to go all the way back to a story by Taylor Stevens in 2018, where Mr. Robinson was not the best communicator. He wanted to say the massive suicide rate we have among teens in Utah must be because they have too many sex partners. He said that without any evidence, without any proof. And after that point, the county chairman, Scott Miller, he said, you know what? I'm actually the spokesperson. Dave Robinson is not. I never intended Dave to assume he was a spokesperson for the party. All communications will go through me, quoting the Tribune story. An organization communication director usually serves as the official mouthpiece, but Miller told the Salt Lake Tribune in an interview that Robinson's position was different. His role was to help develop communications through the issues-based items for our candidates, Miller said. In other words, he was communicating directly with candidates to develop their talking points for issues within the county. That's where we go to Laurie Stringham. She was the main whistleblower with regards to Dave Robinson's abuse of power. So she said that in his unofficial role as helping people craft their message and how to get best elected, she came up with a really clever it was a campaign video where she said, I'm going to stop Jenny Wilson from saying more. We're going to stop this excessive spending and end more. And David Robinson went on to say, and I quote, if you have kids, you might want to take him out of the room right now because I'm quoting what he said. He said, and I quote, you sound like you are having an orgasm. And he said, and I quote again, why are you whoring yourself out? He then made threats to Mrs. Stringham and said, I will ruin you. I will make sure you never get elected. Kind of odd because he's supposed to help her with her communications, and instead he's threatening her and belittling her. And there were at least 5 other women who said that Robinson was using degrading nicknames towards women. So, as I said, Robinson was always working at the behest of the chairperson, Scott Miller, and all these ladies talked about what was going on, and he was doing nothing. And his response was, oh, that's just Dave. That's just Dave. And that's just squabbling among themselves, and it's no big deal. And so the Salt Lake Tribune decided to have Miller and Robinson in a board meeting to talk about what happened. That's when they said, we are writing the story that you have done nothing. You've ignored these women. And then Mr. Miller wrote, I will not be canceled. This is cancel culture run amok. Then Governor Spencer Cox had to get involved, and he said, you, David Miller, or you, Mr. Stephen Miller, need to resign at this point. Miller tried to then put up another big fight, didn't work, he had to step down. Why is this important? Because why was this guy, Dave Miller, allowed to berate women for so long? And why was why was Mr. Miller, I think I misspoke, why was Mr. Robinson able to berate women for so long, and why was Mr. Miller just standing aside letting it happen? It's an interesting question. So let's look at who Mr. Robinson was. This is from the website utah.org. So here's how he describes himself. Dave Robinson's 46 years old. I think he's maybe, this was 2015, so he's actually going to be now 51 years old. He was born in Utah County, was raised in LDS family of 8 children. Dave served a Missouri independence mission. After mission service, Dave traveled. So that's where I actually don't appreciate what's going on here, because then I know what's really going on. This guy is a good old boy. He's wears the LDS plastered on himself like a badge of honor. I did my mission. I'm an LDS man. Give me your special treatment for that. I don't appreciate that. You don't need to state your religious preferences right in the beginning. But then he goes on to say that he was worked on horse breeding farms, and then he came out as a gay man. But again, your religion and your sexuality, I actually don't care. Why should that have anything to do with whether or not you get hired for a job? It just bugs me. So I immediately think, he's going to become a good old boys. And so here he says he was asked by some private landowners in Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon to help resolve a public-private land use conflict. Dave's work in the canyons has led to working relationships and friendships with many, including the U.S. Forest Service, the state of Utah, Salt Lake County backcountry users, ski resorts, many others. So now I want to get into what Dave's actual work has been. He has a company called City Block with these really cool modern designs for homes. And you look at it and you're like, wow, pretty cool. And then you actually get into what he's doing and the projects, and I find this to be kind of interesting. Okay, I click on this triangle house. Triangle house is a triangle house, just like stated. It's at 757 Wall Street. And Wall Street is a historic neighborhood. It's in the north end of Salt Lake City, near the Capitol. Here he puts right on his website, he got approval of these plans in a historic district. That's very difficult to get done. Approval of plans in a historic district in 2015. He boasts that on his website. And this is what I find especially interesting: staff reports and city approval. So he's boasting on his website all the city approvals he's been able to get. And if we click on 600 North, he got it approved. This was relative to a property at 268 West, 600 North in the Salt Lake City Historic Landmark Commission considered the case, and they approved his building of what I believe was a modern home in a historic neighborhood. Did something similar. Capitol Hill, he did this one. But basically, he's an influence peddler. He uses his influence and his good old boy status to get things approved. And then he went on to go and do that in the Cottonwood Canyons. This is where this story gets interesting. In 2017, Robert Gerke wrote this story. It turns out water isn't the only thing that flows downhill out of the Cottonwood Canyons. For years, a group of landowners in Big Cottonwood Canyon have been locked in battles with Salt Lake City over ownership, access to water, first in the courts, now it appears at the state capitol. Property owners have enlisted the help of the head of the commission created to conserve lands to consider whether to roll back a law on the books for more than a century that lets cities get their own water from the canyon, protect the water supply from contamination. So what really this story is all about is that this guy, Wayne Crawford, wanted to build cabins, and he enlisted the help of Dave Robinson to represent Cardiff Canyon. And Crawford wanted to take possession of areas of the canyon through a process called adverse possession, which enabled him to essentially squat on the land, making some improvements, paying back taxes, and taking ownership. Sound confusing, misleading? Salt Lake City thought so. It was a fraudulent way to try to gain possession of the land, and this is who Dave Robinson was trying to help. He was trying to help this guy get access to build cabins. He was actually tried to claim ownership of 60-plus acres that includes Lake Catherine and Lake Mary. Have you seen those lakes, this pristine, beautiful lakes up in the canyons? Trying to take ownership over them. And then that goes into the development at Cardiff Fork, which Mr. Dave Robinson envisioned consolidating development and building 20 cabins in the area, swapping it out for developable land west of the capital. Needless to say, the cabins would be worth millions if the city would permit them and provide the water, which it won't do. So David Robinson became very frustrated with the city. That's part of his thing, and he was part of this brings us back to the Quality Growth Commission. And Dave Robinson is then becoming the president of the Wasatch Canyons Foundation. And he's supposed to be protecting the canyons. He's supposed to be acting as a guy who's protecting the canyons. So then we actually step backward to 2016. Before he did all this, he was accusing County Mayor Ben McAdams of Mountain Accord mismanagement, ran this smear campaign against Ben McAdams. This was just claiming he was mishandling the Mountain Accord, and he wanted to challenge McAdams to become the next Salt Lake County mayor. And then, we move forward to the current day, where we go back to the Taylor Stevens article, where he was trying to be the communications director, but Scott Miller just instead kept him on. But, obviously he was not really doing the best job. So why is this all significant? I think what we find here is Laurie Stringham and the people he was supposed to help, he degraded them, berated them, shamed them for years because he wasn't getting what he wanted out of life. He was essentially an influence peddler who had much bigger ambitions. He was prima donna, and these ladies got mad, and they had every right to be mad. And it's this cancel culture, but probably, from what I can see, this is obviously, there's been no due process here. This is the court of public opinion, but probably it was time for both Miller to step down and, of course, Robinson to move on with other things. But his connection with Utah mountain preservation organizations while he's trying to develop in the mountains, that hypocrisy is so endemic to Utah politics, where these developer/politicians operate in this revolving door environment, and they're there simply to help their buddies or help their little pet projects get passed so they can get a massive windfall of profits if these developments are approved. And it's sad that this goes on so rapidly. It just goes on and on and on like this constantly in Utah politics. And with our declining media, unable to cover so much of these stories, it's only going to happen more. We just need to start covering, get more involved with our civic engagement and supporting local journalism. All right, so let's get on with our comments. Okay, this comment comes from Erica. She says, I've always appreciated your magazine and saw it as a reflection of individual/collective, but always personal Utah lives. I know that you are under no obligation to cater to everyone's opinions, but I do want to say I was disheartened by your coverage of the anti-trans sport bill. You mentioned that you knew your stance would be controversial, so I don't really think I need to spend the time explaining why. But I think you do a disservice to trans and even gender nonconforming children and adolescents in Utah and their stories and experience, which are real and true. I'm disappointed to learn that you sit on the side of exclusion. Okay, 2 points I want to make to this comment. First of all, Trans girls, I'm not anti-trans at all. I'm not anti-trans. Trans people have every right to have the same rights as everybody else, except when their biological advantage comes into play. For example, if you have an X and a Y chromosome, you cannot get rid of that. It is a 10% advantage across the board in athletics. It gives you greater bone density, greater muscle mass, greater lung capacity, greater heart capacity. If it were a performance-enhancing drug, it would be banned. So I'm not anti-trans, I'm pro-girl. And girls compete in athletics in their own departments because of Title IX. And that Title IX protection is what enables ladies' athletics to continue. If we just had ladies and men's athletics into one, it wouldn't be any problem. But to preserve the integrity of ladies' sports, you need to have the division. Second point, to say I have a problem with gender nonconforming children, I have no problem with gender nonconforming children. I know lots of tomboys. I've always been friends with tomboys. My wife was a tomboy. My grandma was a tomboy. There's nothing that I believe more than you don't need to conform with societal norms. What I totally disagree with is this idea that if you are gender nonconforming, that somehow you need to change your gender, that we need to support this notion that wanting to change your gender is okay and normal. There is a term called gender dysmorphia. It is a psychological condition. It's a temporary psychological condition in most cases. We are supporting gender dysmorphia by encouraging people to change their genders. Changing your gender should require going through many, many, many hoops, and it should only happen after people are adults. It should never happen to children. That's where our society and our culture have gone crazy, and I cannot support crazy ideas in the hopes I'm not going to be seemed exclusionary. I'm not exclusionary at all. And we aren't exclusionary at Utah Stories. We are on the side of scientific fact that if you have an X and a Y chromosome, you have a biological advantage that you can never get rid of. And those men, biological men, cannot compete in women's sports. Thanks for the comment, Erica. I really appreciate it. All right, so I'm going to talk just a little bit about this Jen Shaah. Is that how you say her name? She's arrested on federal fraud charges in connection to a nationwide telemarketing scam. She's from Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Shaah and Smith, 43, appeared before U.S. Judge Dustin Peed in Salt Lake City Federal Court on Tuesday, and they've been charged with one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, one count of conspiracy to commit money laundering, based on taking innocent elderly people, taking their money on telemarketing scams. She and her assistant both pled not guilty. This comes from a 9-year scheme in which prosecutors say Shaah and Smith sold alleged services purporting to make the management of victims' businesses more efficient or profitable. These services included tax preparation, website design, even though many of their elderly victims did not own a computer. So she's just like any other Salt Lake City housewife, running a telemarketing scam on the side, allegedly. So I've never seen the program, not familiar with Shaah, but good luck to her, and innocent until proven guilty, just like all the other people who have alleged crimes. I'm glad she's seeing her day in court and wish her the best. So with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. I thank you so much for joining us. The Salt Lake City Green Bike Organization is one of our sponsors. Go visit them at greenbikeutah.org. They have a new fleet of electric bicycles. Very, very cool electric bike program they got going on now. So you could ride tracks, get on an electric bike, go all over town. get back on tracks, go home, not even having to step foot in a car, cleaning our air, getting your cars off the road. It's a great mission. I love these guys. We're also brought to you by cmrbeef.com/Utah Stories. Go visit them for healthy, delicious, environmentally friendly, amazing grass-fed beef. We eat their product at least 2 times a week, and I love what they do. It's delicious. It's good for the environment. Go learn more about them and get saved 10% off your order by visiting cmrbeef.com/Utah Stories. And last thing I have to say is just go visit us on utahstories.com. Again, subscribe to the Voice of Local Utah. Get our digital newsletter. It really is the best way to stop big tech from silencing independent voices. And your voice and our voice, we hopefully continues to be heard. With that, I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me. My name is